Welcome to the Created Worthy podcast. I'm your host, Danielle, and I am so grateful that you're here. On this show, I talk about creative processing and how to utilize it as a skill to bring peace, joy, and freedom into our chaotic lives. I also sit down with the most incredible guests as they share their stories, many of which for the very first time. We are all created worthy. Today's episode is actually an interview with Dr. Courtney Sanfleece on her podcast, the Balanced Wellness Solutions podcast. And it was a really amazing conversation, just giving a little bit of an update on the infertility story and journey that we are walking through. So I wanted to share it with you guys. If you're new here, you can listen to episode 19 to hear about what we previously had gone through. And in this story, I talk more about what we have gone through since our first IUI. Thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Courtney Sanfleece here with Danielle, who is a publication writer. She is a highly recognized lettering artist whose custom gifts have been used over 230 million times. Her work has been featured in places all over the world, and she is now the host of the Created Worthy podcast. And I am so lucky to have her back on my podcast today. Hello. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love your podcast and I love you. So I'm excited to be here and to talk about something that is obviously near and dear to my heart at this season.
Absolutely. So yes, today we are talking about a more serious topic, which hopefully will help others that are maybe going through the same journey and season of their own lives. We're going to be talking about Danielle and her husband and their journey through infertility. They are actively working on their journey in this season of their lives. And she has so much great information to share. And I appreciate her vulnerability and really being able to share this with people because there are so many people and she has had so many different obstacles and challenges and even more recent ones now that she is finding her way through things and kind of being an activist for herself and learning what she needs to do to get through this and make this happen. So Danielle, I am so blessed that you're on to share your story.
Thank you. So yes, my husband and I have been trying for the last 3 years, 4 months-ish, and we still are not pregnant, and it's been really hard. I do have a daughter from a previous relationship. She's 7. My husband is her dad now. Like, he has stepped in as dad, but of course we want a baby together. So I think that the start of this journey was really just something that we could have never imagined we'd be walking through. Like, I had a baby at 19 years old, totally unplanned. So thinking that I would walk through basically teenage pregnancy and infertility was just not ever something that I thought would be in the cards that I would be dealt, but it has been. And I've learned so much just through this whole season. It's been more painful than I could have ever imagined, but it's also been really beautiful to see that how I've been able to connect and relate to so many other people that I would have never been able to previously, just simply because of that longing for a child that still hasn't been filled yet. But the journey of walking through it is, yes, painful, but also incredibly growing in a lot of ways. That's kind of the start of it.
And that's amazing. And just, again, your vulnerability, I appreciate all of it because, and I think so will the listeners, because it's the truth. You never think, especially like you said, you have a happy mistake that happens, your beautiful daughter that came out of a teenage pregnancy and you don't think, gosh, if I can get pregnant that easily. But as you have found out, there's not everybody works well together. And, I'm excited for you to share your findings and where you're at right now. But I know it's just a crazy process, and I can semi relate. I gosh, it was a very long time ago. I have a son who is 14, almost 15, and we started the fertility process as we were not getting pregnant quickly enough, and was kind of like, what's wrong? I have endometriosis. And it was something like, is this an obstacle? Is it not? And we had him. And then actually the second time around, we were going to go through IVF, and we went through one appointment, and it was so overwhelming. We actually thought, you know what, if this is God's plan, then this is it. So we ended up never having a second child, but we were able to get pregnant with Christopher, which was a blessing. So I can relate. I understand. And I know that you've been through deeper into it. And I know you can share as much or as little of that as you want. I touched base on like one appointment and was like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. I don't even know where to start with this. So please share, because like I said, like for me, I did like a round of Clomid, and that was hellacious, and I never want to take that again.
Yes,
and
that
then,
stuff.
and then one appointment, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I had my son who was like almost 3, and I was like, I was like, I was like, you know what? This is not for me. And so, so you have gone way further in the process. So yeah, so share whatever you are willing to that can help our listeners, and just share your story and get it out there.
Perfect. Well, I will tell you and your listeners, I shared a lot more in depth in an episode on my podcast on Created Worthy called Infertility Sucks. And that was recorded last year, right after we had gone through our first failed IUI. So let me take you back a little bit to the beginning again of our infertility journey and how we figured out that there was a problem. So we started in May of 2019, I believe. Yes, May of 2019. And we were excited. I had just come off of an IUD, or had an IUD taken out. I had the copper IUD because I didn't want it to affect my hormones. My husband and I went to the Dominican for our honeymoon. Zika virus was very prevalent during that time. So we had been told you should be on birth control for at least 6 months. I was like, that's fine. So it was 6 months after our honeymoon. Got the birth control removed. We were really excited. We were like, yes, we're going to have a baby. We're going to grow our family. My daughter was like 4 at the time. And then we started trying. And that first month, we tried negative pregnancy tests. The next month tried negative pregnancy test. And I started feeling like something's off. And like, it was just kind of a tick in my spirit at first. Like, I know that it can take a few months now when you are trying and you both are fertile, even in that situation, it can still take a little while to get pregnant. So I was not trying to be impatient, but I really did feel in my spirit like something was off. And I was seeing a therapist at the time who was getting very involved in functional medicine. And she had mentioned, backstory again, my husband is 14 years older than me. So at this point, he was in his late 30s, and my therapist had mentioned that he should have his testosterone checked. And I was like, didn't really know too much, but I was like, yeah, that does seem like a good idea. So I encouraged my husband right at the beginning, after we had been trying for a couple of months, to go get his testosterone checked. He went into the doctor, and actually I went with him to this appointment, and he told the doctor, hey, I'd really like to get my testosterone checked. His doctor was like, you're too young. You don't need to check it. You're only 36. And I looked at his doctor and was like, please test his testosterone. Like, it's not just that we're having problems with infertility. There are other symptoms here too, that I think it's actually potentially worth looking at. So they test his testosterone, and it comes back very low. Now, what I didn't realize about testosterone specifically in men, and what I've learned through our journey, is that if you give testosterone supplements, or Courtney, what is it called when they give you just straight testosterone?
You mean like an injection? Like, so
Yeah.
at the pharmacy, we actually there's actual vials of testosterone where men like inject themselves. And usually you see it in you see it in the population anywhere from like mid 40s to even like in people into their 70s. And
they have like nasal sprays now too, that are just testosterone as well. There are several options I've heard, like in conventional medicine, to help treat testosterone, low testosterone.
What we do mostly is, so like in the pharmacy, so we're also a compounding pharmacy. So in addition to like, they actually moved to a different location, but when they were there, they do a lot of compounding. So they'll do a lot of like topical creams and stuff. And not just for, I just did a podcast on this, how important it is to have testosterone in women as well. I did a podcast on this a couple of weeks ago, and it's that can affect things as well. So a lot of them are topical creams that we put on our bodies as well. And then the traditional pharmaceuticals are injectables that you can do an injectable testosterone level, but we do a lot of compounding creams at the pharmacy as well.
That's amazing. Well, the options for him at this point were this new-ish nasal spray that was not covered by insurance and would have been thousands of dollars, or to do injections. But because we're going through infertility, they said, neither of these are an option. You're going to have to live with your low testosterone, and we will try to give you some natural supplements to see if we can stimulate your body to produce it itself. But the reason he couldn't take testosterone is because it can actually diminish your sperm count. So at this point, Gary, my husband, had gone and done an analysis and found out, thankfully, he did have sperm. And what we also learned is if you don't have any sperm, it's really hard, almost impossible, to start producing it when you don't have any. But if you still have some, there are some methods that you can try to increase that, but you can't use testosterone because that could kill all your sperm. So we were in this weird place where we were like, we weren't really sure if it was the testosterone problem that was causing it. I went to my OBGYN and they started doing all of these blood panels. They started me on a round of Clomid. I went through 3 rounds of Clomid. All of my blood tests came back. My levels were all perfectly normal. They were like, in the ultrasound, they were like, you have PCOS-ish, but it doesn't seem to affect your fertility at all. This is something that you've probably had since you were very young. I did have cysts when I was in high school, so it wasn't a surprise. They also just were not really concerned about it. At this point, my husband was referred to an endocrinologist who did an MRI to determine whether it was his brain or his, I don't know, prostate. Is that what? Yeah. Yeah. So they had to,
that's where it was.
They had to figure out like what was dysfunctioning, and they realized it had nothing to do with his brain. So they sent him to then a urologist who specialized in male factor infertility. So that's really where our infertility journey really started to take off. And like, we started doing actual treatments and seeing some results. So my husband started seeing a urologist. I was still seeing my OBGYN. We did this for 2 years. We went through all of the tests. We went through many rounds of Clomid. They started my husband on Clomid. They started my husband on HCG to just try to get his sperm count up. They were like, technically, you guys could get pregnant naturally because he's producing sperm and you're ovulating every month, but it's not working. So after 2 years of doing it through just his urologist and my OBGYN, we were referred to the fertility specialist here in Denver. And that's when it really started to get emotionally challenging, because it was like we sat down with the fertility doctor and he was basically telling us all of our options and the statistics of things working. He's like, what I'd recommend for you guys is that you do 3 rounds of IUI, which is an insemination. So where they take my husband's sperm, they do a sperm wash, which means they take out basically all of the semen and they leave just the sperm. And then they turkey baster it up there.
For lack of better words,
it looks nothing like a turkey baster. It's actually like a tube. They like stick it past your cervix, put the sperm in there. It just makes it so that the sperm can swim easily straight into the egg. When you have an IUI, they do a lot of tracking for me. So I had a lot of ultrasounds in which they just tracked the size of the follicle. They wanted to make sure it was big enough. They wanted to make sure that the lining is thick enough. Everything has to be perfect. We did that the first time last September. We were hopeful and it didn't work. And that crushed me really. Cause it was like, I think for myself, I've always just felt like IVF isn't an option. I still kind of feel like that, to be honest. I love, love that IVF has been an option for so many women who have gone before me and will come behind me, and that they have gotten their beautiful miracle babies from that. But for me, as somebody who has struggled with mental health problems before and doesn't do well on hormones, going through the process of IVF really scared me. So even when we were talking to the doctor, the fertility doctor at the beginning of this, he was telling us IUIs only have a 12%, around 12% chance of working. And that is if both of us were in optimal numbers. Now, when we went in for the first IUI, Gary had been in treatments for a while. So his sperm count had increased, but when we actually went in the day of the IUI, after wash count was really low. And you don't know that until you go in and they're about to do the IUI. So it was disappointing to know it was so low, but it was still like over 1 million. And they were like, it only takes one. And so I was like, okay, we'll do it. We did it. It didn't work. And that time they give you a trigger shot. They give the woman a trigger shot for an IUI as well. So you have HCG in your system. And so I was testing out the trigger shot, meaning I was taking a pregnancy test every day and it was positive. And if I was pregnant, it would remain positive and just continue to get darker. But if it was negative, which is what ended up happening, you take a pregnancy test every day and it just gets a little lighter every day. And so going through that was like torture on myself. And I remember after that, I told my husband, like, I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing an IUI again. Like, this is not okay. Like, I cannot handle this. It's like too painful. I don't understand. Like, I was so frustrated. And then my heart kind of started to shift again at the beginning of the year. And I was like, you know what? In May, I'll give it another chance. Like, we'll see where his numbers are at. He had gone back to his doctors. They had readjusted his levels and hit the medication he was on. He was doing more analysis. The results were coming back much more positive. He did one, what was it? Like 4 days before our last IUI in May. And it was 5 times what it was the previous time. So his counts were so high, so up. And I was like, yes, like,
Right.
thank you, God. Like, we are finally moving in the right direction. Like, there's a much higher odds that this is going to work. So Sunday comes around. He gets that analysis on Tuesday. Sunday comes around. It's time for the IUI. This time they like let him come in the room with me while we do the IUI. And they come in and they're like, I have some not so great news. His counts are really low. They're actually lower than last time, the last IUI we had gone through. And I was like, immediately broke down. I was like, this cannot be real. Like, we did everything we possibly could have to prevent this. He increased his medication. We made sure that it was working just 4 days ago. Like, how does this happen? Like, I just looked at my husband and like immediately broke down. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't want to do this. And he was like, you don't have to do this. He's like, but we're here and like, we've come this far. Like, we might as well just try. And I was like, okay, fine. So we did. Come the end of May, find out it didn't work, and it sucked. Like, it really sucked. And May was just a really bad month for me. But what I've realized in this last month of being able to process and coming off of all of the hormones that they put me on since then, and just like starting to feel like a real human again, was that
I was just going to say yes, because I kind of went through you as your friend with this, and I've watched you kind of do a complete 180 from where you were in May and where you are now. And, you know, it's not easy. And my heart's heavy right now because I've watched you go through it. And like I told you, I didn't even have the courage to go through one day of it. So all that you've been through is just, you guys are amazing.
Thank you so much. It is quite a painful journey, like I've said a million times, but it also like I am very firmly a person who believes that everything really does happen for a reason. Like I know it's cliche. I know that a huge part of that belief roots from the fact that I have faith that I've been created worthy, that my life has a purpose, and that every trial that we walk through is meant to serve more than just me. And that really helps me to walk through it and get through it. And so yeah, in the last month, I've come off of all of the medicine. I feel better. And then I started to reflect. And this is kind of what brings us to current. I started to think about the fact that every time I have sex with my husband, I get really itchy. And I have sensitive skin. I've developed a lot more allergies as I've gotten older, but I've just never, maybe because we've been going through all the infertility stuff and they've been doing all of this testing, I've just like assumed that if there was something wrong on my end, that they would catch it. But it was only a couple of weeks ago where I was like, okay, this is like I'm like really uncomfortable, and I'm just going to call my doctor and see if there's any chance that maybe I'm allergic to my husband's sperm. So I did. And the doctor, my fertility doctor and my primary care doctor were like, yes, that is definitely possible. And we need to do some more testing and figure out if this could be a reason for our infertility. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Is I'm waiting to go to a doctor's appointment. We've tested it out. Like, sorry if this is TMI for any of your listeners, but we tried to like have sex with a condom instead, and I'm not itchy. So I do feel like that's kind of a sign that there is definitely an allergy there that needs to be addressed. But that to me is actually really hopeful, because after our last IUI and after the doctors had seen how low the last sample was when we went in for the procedure, they basically said, you know, your only next step is IVF. And that was even harder to bear this time, because it was like the weight of this was so much higher, because if it didn't work, then we knew that another IUI probably wasn't going to get us the baby that we were hoping for. So to just be able to kind of give yourself time to process through what you're feeling, listening to your body, I think that that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned with infertility is like, if you have something ticking in your spirit, or you're having a symptom that just doesn't seem right, don't just silence those thoughts. Like, look into them, lean into them, be willing to explore that with your doctor. And if you have a doctor who won't listen, then go find another doctor, because you are not limited to just the doctor who is around the corner from you, or just the doctor who is closest to you. There are lots of doctors. And I know that insurance in our medical system in America has made it very difficult to, especially with infertility, because infertility isn't typically covered by insurance. It's made it very difficult to address your symptoms or to find somebody who will listen to you. But I promise you that there are doctors out there who will. And it does take advocating for yourself and for your family. I had to basically ask and beg my husband's primary care doctor to run a testosterone test on him. And that was the start of us realizing that there was a big likelihood that this is male factor infertility, and getting him the support that he's needed, and finding a doctor that would listen to him and would address all of these issues. Like, he's even contacted his doctor about this potential allergy. And his doctor was like, absolutely, that could be a thing. Like, definitely explore that. And the thing with that is that allergy treatment is typically covered by insurance. So hopefully we'll be able to find some answers there. That's just, I mean, again, we don't have a baby. I'm not pregnant, but I would say that my husband and I's marriage is in a better place just from the fact that we are not so focused on just having a baby, but rather like enjoying our marriage together and figuring this out together. Like, there have been seasons where it was like, became all about the fact that we don't have this thing we really want. And that really hurt us in our marriage. But at this time, like, we've walked through those, we've communicated through those seasons, and now we're not to say like we're coming on the other side or we've arrived, because we never will have, but we are coming out of like the cloud as far as just how infertility has affected us. And we're like, you know what? Like, we're not going to take no as an answer right now. Like, we're going to do the work to explore our options, and we're going to find doctors who listen to us, and we're going to see where this takes us. So yeah, that's my infertility story.
I think that that's amazing. And I think that you just summed up, you summed up why my career has taken a turn from a traditional, retail pharmacist into a functional medicine practitioner, because it's all about having somebody that will listen to you. And it's all about being an advocate for yourself, because there are so many doctors. You don't even know how many doctors that I come in contact with on a daily basis. I actually just this past weekend, my sister-in-law's cousin is a doctor and literally was just discussing his early retirement because he can't even refer patients where he needs to refer them and do what he wants to do as a physician because of insurance mandates and all of the things that come along with it. And it's so sad, because it's like, wow, the world is now losing a practitioner that really truly cares about his patients and wants what's best for them and takes the time to listen and go through the whole thing. And it's like, there are so many doctors that want to do that and that are mandated by insurance that can't. There are the doctors that just don't do it, that do the write the quick script and get them out the door and boom, boom, boom. Here's your 8 minutes of glory. Great. Tell me about your thing. Okay, great. Here's a script. Bye. See ya. And then they're back again, not feeling good, no problem solved, whether it be, anxiety and depression, or whether it be having a baby, on one end of the spectrum to another. And the fact that your strength and courage, both you and your husband, that you have stuck with this and that you both have been advocates for yourself, because, a lot of times when you reach that threshold where it gets exhausting, it gets absolutely like just your story you just told as you're telling it, my heart's just getting heavier and heavier, because it's like one time after another. And it's, now you're looking at the emotional factor of it, and you're looking at the hormonal factor, everything on hormones is like raised to like the umpteenth degree. So yeah, I know. And it's just amazing that, just your strength and your courage, and then just your personal story of just tying it in to your marriage just being stronger, because that's where it's at, just like having that faith in each other and knowing that it's all going to be okay no matter what happens. And you're just going through this journey together, and you will have a beautiful baby soon. I know it. I can feel it in my heart. I think that you just hit on this newfound functional medicine aspect of infertility. Literally an allergic reaction, like you said. There's nothing that's TMI on Balanced Wellness Solutions podcast. But no, absolutely. Like doing your own little clinical trial and being like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's do our little own science experiment here and see what happens. I think that, you're onto something. And then, like you said, all of the money that you've spent, that you've depleted, your energy, all of these things that you've depleted over the past few years, and just even your faith and just everything is almost kind of turned around. You have hope that you have another direction to go in. And I love that you shared this information, because there's a lot of people that might not know that this is even a thing, that they could say, hey, is this something that I should bring to my physician that might not be so much to test for? Like, it might just require a couple of easy tests that are like, yes, and then to figure out a way to solve the problem. So I think it's amazing, your newfound info. I'm loving it.
Thank you. Yes, I do think one other thing, I think the last thing I want to say about infertility in general, especially as it relates to being in a relationship or married, is to do exactly what you were saying, to remember that you are in this together. Like, if you are trying for a baby, one, hopefully you really trust that person that you're wanting to become a parent with. And two, you trust that person so much that that they are in this with you. And that is my natural reaction to things when things go wrong. And a lot of this stems from my childhood and lots of different things and previous relationships, is to push away and to be like, I can't do this. Like, this is not going to work. Clearly we're not good enough for each other. It's just to go into this irrational place in my mind where I just spiral. But one thing my husband did right after we found out the results of our last IUI was he grabbed me by the shoulders and he was like, Danielle, no matter what, we are in this together. Like tomorrow we're going to wake up and we're going to be here together, whether you're pregnant or not. It doesn't matter, because we're going to do this. We're going to walk through this. We're going to love each other more no matter what. We have to choose that though. And I was like, oh my gosh. And like one of his doctors had warned us, like, don't have sex to just get pregnant. That will ruin your marriage. And I'm so glad that he said that, because that we walked through a season where that was a huge problem for us. It was like, it was not intimate at all. And we did not feel connected to each other. And that can affect infertility. There are so many things that can affect infertility, but remembering while you're walking through it, that this is a journey where you don't have to be alone. Like, it doesn't matter if it's male factor or female factor. Maybe it's both. In our case, we don't know. I thought for a long time that it was male factor, but now here we are. Maybe it's not. Regardless, we're in this together, and there is a whole community of people, infertility warriors on social media and support groups, and so many different resources, just so many people that you can connect with, and places where you can remember that like this isn't something that you have to go through alone. But it's very isolating. It feels very isolating, especially when like you feel like your body isn't functioning how it should be, how it's been created to. And that can be really hard to walk through, even just mentally. So my big encouragement, lean into your support and know that you are really not alone.
I love that. That makes me happy. I'm so happy that you guys are on the right path. I'm so happy that you guys are in it together, because yes, I've seen a lot of stories where it has destroyed marriages, and that's the most important point of it all. No matter what, you guys are in it together and everything's going to be okay. And yes, we will put all of any links that you have for people that are interested, that have been helpful for you. We can put them all in the show notes at the bottom so that anybody can click on the links and check out what Infertility Sucks. Is that the one on your podcast?
Yeah. So it's season 1. I believe it's episode 19. It's just called Infertility Sucks. So if you want to know more,
the Created Worthy podcast, and we'll put the link to that on the show notes as well.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, Courtney.
Thank you so much for being on. I can't wait till you're on again, because I have a feeling it's going to be like the struggles of pregnancy, the tips and tricks of pregnancy, and how you can get through the emotional and physical obstacles. That's going to be our next.
I'm here for it. Let's speak life.
I know. Let's do it, girl. All right. Thank you so much for being on. I love you so very much. And until next time.
Sounds good. Love you. Thank you so much for listening to the Created Worthy podcast. If you want to connect more, you can follow along with me over at Danielle Damrell or Damrell Creative Co. on Instagram and Facebook. All the links to today's topics are in the show notes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon, which is where you can help support my mission on this show and keep it going. Ratings and reviews really do matter, so make sure to hook me up with 5-star review. Any less, I would rather hear your opinions over email. So anyway, if this episode resonated with you at all, share the love, send it to a friend, or post it on your social media. But don't forget to tag me so I see it and can share it too. I hope all of you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the flip side.